Well, tonight, as always, I can't remember a Zoom meeting where we were not in for a treat. But I'm expecting a very special treat tonight because Daniela is really an expert in her field, and she has a lot to share with us that would be extremely helpful. And just as an introduction, because the title is that there are areas of intervention called for outside and beyond logotherapy before we actually start a process of a search for meaning or illumination of meaning in the person's life. And I am reminded that of Frankel's statement that said that logotherapy is not a panacea. In other words, it's not a solution or a remedy to all difficulties and diseases and afflictions and traumas. It's very central in its own area, but we do need the complement and the additions and of other methods of intervention that is called for to complete the picture. So, Daniela, without any further ado, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Teria. I really love the fact that I can speak to you tonight. Trauma therapy is really on my heart. And when I started with logotherapy, then I found out that trauma therapy and logotherapy really do fit together in a perfect way. Um, when I first started with logotherapy, I thought, well, logotherapy doesn't give an answer to what I work with. But that's not true. And today I will introduce you to trauma therapy. So the focus is more on trauma than on logotherapy, but you will find that logotherapy perfectly fits in. And therefore, I prepared three little simple shows for you because I like it when things are really simple to understand. So I don't overload you. I try not to overload you with a lot of information. I try just to give you some basic informations. And so I will start my screen if I can. I think, Robert, you have to allow me to share my screen. Mm.
I think it will probably
Oh,
allow it
now it's possible. Okay.
as a.
Yeah, thank you. Mm, so I've tried it with tone. Okay, not my emails, not this one. So I have three simple shows, and this is what I would like to do with you tonight. The first video is the longest. It's about trauma basics, where I explain that you have a basic understanding. Then I will a video about monotrauma. This is a trauma that appears one time in life, maybe in adult life. So this is just one experience, and this is the easiest way to handle that. But often we have to deal with complex trauma, and these are a series of experiences that begin in childhood, and sometimes they, yeah, take really long until they stop. So I start with my first simple show, and then we can have a little Q&A, and then we have the second simple show, Q&A, and so on. Okay, here we go. What is psychological trauma? We all know traumatic experiences. Nightmares, fear, flashbacks, and avoidance are typical symptoms of trauma-related disorders that do not disappear by finding meaning. These are situations in which our life or our dignity is threatened. We are overwhelmed with our ability to react, and there is subjectively no way out. Symptoms arise at the level of the psyche and body. Examples can be a car accident, a rape, a war experience, or even bullying. To understand what happens in our body during a traumatic experience, let's first look at how regular experiences are processed and stored in the brain. All impressions pass the entrance gate to consciousness, which is our thalamus in the brain. Behind the thalamus, the amygdala evaluates whether there is an emergency case or not. The check between the thalamus and the amygdala is very fast. At the same time, the impressions are compared with existing knowledge by the hippocampus, which takes a little longer. We only remember what the amygdala classified as emotionally relevant. It is stored by the hippocampus in the place where similar information is already available. This ensures that we can remember. Traumatic experiences trigger an emergency mode. The emergency mode ensures that the information is processed differently. The amygdala reports danger and thus stops the internal processing of impressions. The body now reacts with survival mode. Blood is pumped into the muscles so that we can fight or run away. Sometimes we freeze. We find it difficult to think in the situation because the prefrontal cortex is less supplied with blood. In the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nerves are activated. In emergency mode, events are no longer filtered according to emotional relevance, but end up unfiltered in the trauma memory. Trauma memory is not directly accessible to us. We get in touch by fragmented memories showing up from the inside or triggers coming from our environment. After the event is over, our organism tries to sort and clean up the traumatic memory. Much of this happens during sleep, which often takes several days. Post-traumatic stress disorders such as sleep disorders, panic attacks, fear, avoidance, increased alertness, or flashbacks only occur when our organism has not been able to sort through the trauma memory. Here's an example. Eve survived a terrorist attack. In the nights after, she sleeps restlessly. During the day, she is jumpy and avoids going outside. Sometimes she feels she is reliving the terrorist attack. She stands there with her eyes wide open and loses control. Eve can no longer distinguish between then and now. Her brain is in emergency mode. She has a flashback. In trauma therapy, we help the organism to retrieve the fragments of the trauma memory and sort them into the narrative memory to stop the symptoms. In case of a traumatic experience in adulthood, healing is easily possible. It is more difficult when there are recurring traumatic experiences beginning in early childhood. Small children can split off part of her personality in trauma situations and, in worst case, develop several personalities in order to cope with all the pain. Such splits are the strongest form of dissociation. Victims are often not able to network their experiences in some areas of life. They cannot learn from certain episodes of life because the information is not stored in a coherent way. It makes sense to clear up the trauma memory, bring everything to the surface and work them through. Logotherapists can easily make the mistake of de-reflecting from the symptoms. Then the patient learns to live with the trauma and retain suffering. However, Viktor Frankl mentioned that the suffering should be stopped if that is possible. Therefore, it is in the spirit of logotherapy to recognize the symptoms as a task. The active processing of trauma memories reduces symptoms and brings to light details that can be very important in the process of finding meaning. There are several ways to process trauma experiences. In the next video, I will show you how it can be done. Okay, so far. If you have some questions, you can ask questions before I show the next video. So if there's anybody who wants to say something or ask something, feel free.
Well, just this that you might throw light on. In what you say, the various kind of fractures, dissociation, in being faced with a trauma, one cannot immediately work through. You're just struck with it. Would you agree that it's a very necessary function of our bodies and our psyches to protect our spirits, to protect the person behind the suffering? It's a way of giving a space, of offering an opportunity to come to grips with that it's a beautiful kind of analogy of that even our bodies and our psyches are functioning in traumatic instances to protect our persons, spiritual beings behind it all.
I don't know if our spiritual being needs to be protected. Our psyche needs to be protected. The psyche is how we function. This is where our emotions are. And I do believe that it is more the psychological level that is protected by the trauma reaction from the body. I do believe that the spirit is able to overcome that.
Yes, at a later stage, but
at
just
a later
initially.
Yes.
Initially.
Yeah. People are very different, and sometimes it really takes time until one can go through a trauma or one can face what happened. But I say when somebody comes and has a lot of trauma symptoms, and this is really hard to live with, then I really encourage to face it, because with the help of our spirit, we can do it. And this is where logotherapy comes in. Logotherapy says that we can overcome our body and soul. Soul is another word for spirit, for psyche. So our body and our psyche are affected, but not our spirit.
Yeah. But I was thinking of a child, that is kind of defensive in the face of something hurtful. And it just is a way of protecting itself. You know, all the defense mechanisms that Freud speaks about, for example, against trauma. It's a bridge that, of course, allows the spirit then to emerge to overcome the disastrous immediate impact that leaves you with symptoms of trauma. But go on, Daniela. It was just an interesting thought that came to mind.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Kanda, you would like to say something?
Yeah, I thought what Terea raised is a very important issue. I am always very, very uncomfortable if we, okay, let's put the question is this. I don't know if you know that there are people who are questioning the use of debriefing in trauma, especially if it has just happened. Because some have said that actually the debriefing just after the event can make the situation even worse. So that could be maybe, I'm not sure if something Terea was referring to, but I don't know if you know about that, the issue of debriefing and trauma.
Yeah, there are many opinions about that. Some really say right after the trauma, you have to process it and then it's going better. But I say when it's time to process a trauma, this is not my decision. It's always the decision of the person who has a trauma. So if I decided for my client or for my patient, then I do harm on him. So
I
I
truly
don't have
love
the
that.
right to decide that.
Yes, I truly love that. I truly love that answer. That ours as a therapist then is to listen when the client is ready to face whatever. So sometimes, especially when the event has happened, we still have to ask what matters, what is important for that person. And sometimes it's not an issue. Look, I don't even have to go there because violence now is almost everywhere. Sometimes it's not an issue of me going through what I went through in the past. Sometimes it's what is happening right now, what I have to respond to. So I truly love that answer to say we have to be careful in terms of knowing when it's ready to deal with the event. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and thank you for this question because trauma therapy is not a therapy itself. It's embedded in a larger context of therapy. So we do it when the client is ready to do it. Dida wanted to say something. Dida?
Yeah, sorry. Daniela, I would like to ask, what if the client, the person, doesn't remember anything of a trauma, of a very early age trauma, and doesn't even have flashbacks or things like that? But you as a therapist, you suspect that he or she must have had a certain real trauma at early childhood, but the person doesn't remember anything, doesn't even have cues or meaning cues or anything. What then?
This is my third video. So please wait for the third video and then you will have the answer. I hope so.
Please go on. Yes.
Okay, Robert raised his hand.
Hi Daniela. There's just a comment also in the chat that I would like to relay for us. Lily Barrington says here, when I first encountered Frankel's work, I was concerned that he was saying the equivalent of the only disability in life is a bad attitude, which is not true. However, I appreciate that it comes up so much that he says that trauma and suffering should be stopped where possible. I also relay really appreciate the current questions and answers. So just want to relay that one for us as well.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay,
Yeah.
now I come to the second video, and it shows
Yeah.
how how trauma therapy can be done. This is the simple case, so to say. Let's
May I
see.
say something quickly? Oh, you're already on the
Yes,
next one.
yes, you
Okay.
can. Please,
Oh,
please.
thank you. No, I was just getting back to trying to just understand what Taria was saying while still understanding what you're saying. So yes, of course, you know, it is the spirit that cannot become ill and is unscathed, but there's still an awareness. The spirit is still part of our makeup, even though we can separate the dimensions. But that's what I think maybe what Taria was saying in a sense is that, you know, in the case of a small, pure, unscathed, a child who has who's completely unscathed, and yes, on a psychological level as well, but there's still some kind of an awareness on a spirit level, you know, as a spiritual being coming into a human form. It's just the essence of that, how the body and the psyche and the body tries to protect itself in a sense, so that to protect the essence of the person. I think that's maybe the thought that was coming through.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Very good thought. Okay. So let's start the second one. How are psychological traumas dealt with? Logotherapists sometimes struggle with the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorders because the noetic dimension of human existence cannot resolve the symptoms. The symptoms are physical reactions and occur on the physical and psychological level. Although our spirit lives in the body and uses the psyche, we can distance ourselves in the sense of self-transcendence. This enables us to look at even the worst events and clear them up. In order to reduce symptoms such as nightmares, hypervigilance, panic attacks, or flashbacks, the trauma memory must be addressed. By doing so, those affected can come to rest, learn out of their experience, and find the best answer to it. Some patients are afraid to look at their trauma. They fear that this could make them worse off. That is why we use techniques to make it easier for patients to face their history. Now I'm going to show you the screen method. To clear up trauma memory, we need all the details of the event. What happened? How did it feel or smell? What sounds were there? What was there to see or taste? In order to gain some distance from the trauma, the patient imagines to watch the event on a screen. If the event was very bad, one can imagine the screen to be very small and place it far away. Now all the details from the trauma memory are brought to light. We sort the event into the narrative memory storage. If we slowly look at everything in detail on the screen, a single cleanup action can be enough. The slower and more detailed the event is observed, the better it is processed in the hippocampus and can no longer trigger symptoms. The detailed knowledge can be very stressful. As logotherapists, we know about the meaning that is present and can be found in all circumstances. Other therapists often struggle to find an answer when faced with deep suffering. After processing the trauma, the patient can learn from it, recognize his task in the circumstances and find peace. Here's an example. Eve is going through her experience of surviving a terrorist attack. With self-transcendence, she can look at her body and psyche. She also uses the screen method to make the experience more bearable. Now Eve is instructed to reconstruct the trauma of the terrorist attack exactly. Step by step, she imagines watching everything again as a film and tells her therapist every detail. Eve helped a child in the trauma situation. She had completely forgotten about it. The therapist slows down the process and listens attentively to find logo hints in it. After Eve has realized everything, she has no more nightmares. She is now well rested and helps parents of children who have been harmed by war and terror. Okay, so this is the easiest case you can have in trauma processing. If you have any questions or if you want to say something, please feel free. Dr. Kanda.
Yeah, look, Daniela, you are raising very, very serious issues. Huh? It's very, very serious. It's I'm personally where I am feeling actually very, very uncomfortable because, let's say in general, is a normal memory, is a normal day-to-day memory a true representation of the reality in general? Can a normal daily memory like today, I've had a day, it was not traumatic, whatever I remember, is it the true representation of what has happened?
What is your question?
My question is this: do we have to go into details of what happened exactly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is really, really stressful going into all the details. But if you don't do that, then things can remain in trauma memory. They can cause flashbacks and other symptoms. So if you do it, if with half of your heart, this is how we say it in Germany, if you do it not fully, completely, not with all details, then something remains and you have to go through it over and over. And this is even more stressful than doing it one time and doing it correctly and completely.
No, I agree. Absolutely. There is a healing power that Frankl said we can only really confront a situation in a real meaning assessing way if we know all the details, if we have all the facts before us. No, we can discuss this further. I would love to hear how Daniela enters it with concludes it with a third video. Because then we can really take up the conversation and address all these questions. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just one thing. Many trauma therapists, even here, therapists that I do know, they are not bold enough to stay on every detail. They just use headlines and think this is enough. But then the patient goes home and doesn't find rest.
Yeah.
And they have to go over it and over it and over it again. So sometimes the therapist protects himself, doesn't protect the client. protects them himself. And this is another
That's true.
topic.
That's another aspect. Very,
I
very interesting
agree.
one.
I agree with you. My issue is as much as is there not a risk of hyper reflection? Because some memories have got their own time, and of course the therapist should be in a position of listening to those memories. So you can listen to what is available. This is why I think there was another question before. What happens if the person genuinely does not remember?
Mm.
Yeah. But because my fear is we might easily go into an hyper reflection, wanting to remember what exactly happened. And again, even the way we want to remember what exactly happened.
Yeah, okay, I got you. Okay. We don't need to do that. If it's there, then it's okay. For me as a therapist, I ask for details. So I encourage my patient to stay in this picture. They see a picture on the movie they watch. So I encourage to stay there, and I ask question, what was there and what are the details. If they know it, it's good. If they don't know it, it's okay. So I don't stress that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Aviva.
Hi. Sorry, I have a few points from the previous video as well, with regards to when to address the trauma. The client really needs to be strong enough to be able to face going to that place, and also to continue what you said. You know, therapists are also individuals like clients, and not every therapist, even if they have the title of a trauma therapist, can deal with trauma. And the client is usually hyper aware to the reaction of the therapist, and it can make it worse. So not every therapist can and should be a trauma therapist, because also when you dig into trauma, you have to be prepared for wildcard, for any sort of reaction from them, and be able to deal with that, especially when you usually only have an hour, because if it's not dealt with correctly over the hour, they can leave in an even worse condition. And it also has to be once there is a connection and a trust. And I think also from experience, the client has to also be built up before addressing the traumas, with also connected to what you said about the describing the events and the distancing. They need to know how to distance beforehand, and to sort of practice it with small things, in my opinion, before we get to the big trauma, and to be able to know, okay, if they slip out of it, to be able to breathe. You know, I think all of these things, sorry, I don't have the words, you need to have a safety underneath for if they slip or fall, that they are caught. And this is a very dangerous area for like I said, not every therapist could, you know, a lot of trauma therapists can say, okay, with sexual abuse or with this or with that. But if someone comes with, let's say, a terror attack or something, it's out of their sphere. And also to respond, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, sir. You asked about hyper fixation. Doctor, not sir, sorry. Any situation that any person experiences is true to the events according to their perception and feelings. It's like Frankl said, you know, if you have people looking at a tower, it's the same tower, but I see it from this angle. The person even next to me sees it from a different angle. So you can have multiple people at the same event, but because of their physical and spiritual and psychological state, they translate it differently. And it is true to them, even though it may not be factually true to the event.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you, Aviva. Thank you very much for saying this. This is really, really important. Yeah, I can only agree. Not everybody should be a trauma therapist. You have to deal with your own issues, with your own history, with your own trauma before you can start this kind of work. If you don't do that, then you can't finish it and you make it worse. So that's absolutely very important to me. And thank you. I really thank you for saying this. Yes.
And Aviva is so spot on in her observations because she has gone through, like you, Daniela, through tremendous trauma. And you've been tested in that area. And you've developed skills in those areas. You've developed insights into those areas. And to me, a yardstick will always be whether the therapist can can comprehend the life of their clients, which they cannot do if they had not gone through that particular stresses and trauma. Like, for example, BAN can do counseling with sexual trauma that I can't do because I haven't gone through sexual trauma. There are other traumas I went through that I can deal with. So it's very important in terms of trauma that the trauma counselor should be someone who had gone through trauma to such a depth and a degree that they've got a voice there, that other people that have not gone through have not developed that voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing is about stability. This is a very big discussion under trauma therapists, if the patient needs to be stable to do this kind of work. Some say yes and some say no. And I say, well, the patient decides whether he is ready to do it or not. I have clients who are in ongoing trauma situations. They are never stable enough to do it, but they want to work on it. And it really gets better when they decide to do it. So usually we say you have to have some distance to the trauma, you have to have some kind of stability in your life, and then you can process it. This is the best case. But I do know that it sometimes works if it's not the case. And it's not my decision, it's the decision of the client.
So, sorry, may I say, Daniela, just on what you have said now, is it not possible then to conceive or to propose or to submit that then in any therapy, one of the important value is the safety of the client, even the safety in them recounting what they are saying. Because if they don't feel safe in this moment, it's very difficult for them to report what. So, as I like what Terea used to say, that space of therapy is a sacred space. So mine, in my case, would be to create the safety, create an environment of love, and let the memory come out. It would come out when it's time to come out. Personally, I used to have a client who told me at one moment and say, I have to tell you something. It is in this dark room, but I'm not ready to step in that dark room. Then I said, that's okay. Yeah. Let's deal with what we have now. And guess what? when I was not expecting it. He said, "Today, doctor, I think I'm ready to get in the dark room." So there is some work which needs. That's why the reason I'm saying this is because I was saying hyperintention. Hyperintention is sometimes when we narrow everything on one thing and we want to get that thing, we want to get that details. And if I'm talking so strongly, it's because I'm seeing a lot of damage, especially in the work I'm doing as a doctor. You know, as part of work is especially the first time you meet the interview, we have to ask questions. And sometimes the way we ask those questions, oh, so you were raped. You were raped when? By whom? So the person has, you see, then the person has got this very narrow opportunity to answer to a very complex event, that because I want to write in my notes that I did ask that, but not because I want to help the person to get better. So that's what I just wanted to say. Hyperintention could be just you are narrowed and focusing on something particular which does not necessarily relate to the calling of the client in this moment. But
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kantor. Thank you so much. Asking the wrong questions can be violent. So I used to say, are you ready to talk about it, or do you want to talk about it? And then I wait, and that's enough. If someone gives me a headline like I've been raped, or I say, oh, okay, do you want to talk about it? I open space, nothing else. Okay. So thank you. Now I'm ready to show you the third video about complex trauma, and this is a little different. Let's see. This is this one.
How are complex psychological traumas dealt with? We speak of complex trauma when traumatic events have been repeated. Often the events begin in childhood and continue over several years. In therapy, it is important to know that trauma memories often contain more than just events. Children split off parts of their psyche in order to cope with ongoing trauma. Experiences are linked to parts of the psyche, so we need to address the part of the psyche that is linked to the trauma. We refer to this as working with ego states. Ego states arise in traumatic situations and in many cases retain the age at which they were formed. Here is an example. Tim was repeatedly beaten since he was 2 years old. From the age of 5, he was sexually abused by various abusers. Tim comes to therapy at the age of 62 and only knows that he was raised very strictly. Tim has self-esteem issues and is experiencing burnout. At times he is overcome by feelings of deep despair. Tim no longer has the strength to work at a daycare center, even though he loves his job and finds it deeply meaningful. His life is full of tasks that fulfill him deeply. He has no explanation for his suffering. We want to get to know Tim better and trace the symptoms back to his past. When did he first feel this deep despair? We use self-transcendence and guide Tim to travel in his imagination to his former self until he finds the younger Tim who experienced this despair for the first time. Adult Tim lets his younger self show him what led to his despair. In his imagination, they can talk to each other. Now the adult Tim is connected to a 2-year-old ego state from his trauma memory. Since the younger Tim has remained in the trauma content, he does not know that he is now 62 years old. The adult enlightens his former self, cares for him, comforts him, and, if necessary, takes him to a better place to live. All of this happens in the imagination. We create a new experience of calm in our brain that is linked to the trauma. In this way, the traumatic event can be stored with something good and becomes more bearable. Our brain doesn't care whether we really experienced it or only imagined it. Tim now understands the source of his despair. He can comfort and nurture his soul. He can organize what he has learned from his younger self into his narrative memory and respond to it. Lots of similar traumatic events can be grouped together and worked through with the help of the earlier self. An exemplary event then stands for a whole series of traumas. Tim cries bitterly when his former self shows him the series of sexual assaults. He was unaware that these things had happened. After helping his inner child, Tim is no longer desperate. He now understands abused children he has been working with for so long much better. His own experience has been a meaningful lesson.
Okay. Now you may have many questions. I tried to shorten to make it to explain it the easiest way. I I was able to. So feel free. Yeah,
Beautifully done, Daniela. We are really going to, it's such a deep and important issue that I see Robert said that comments that have been sent will be sent to you, that you can take up those questions in answering them personally. But it's a thing that we will continue, and we hope to continue with our next Zoom session, because really it's going behind the surface of the trauma, and you've done it so well in lifting out how our spiritual selves, who we really are, seek for the connection that was broken then. And when we can find that connection in the situation of brokenness, in other words, like you took it back to the child that was the inner child that was kind of split off and hidden from the adult's conscious recognition, to connect with that child that was open and trusting and had such a shock to experience something so contrary to his own will to be meaningfully part of life. So every such connection that then is made brings healing, because it's a reconnection to the person who is gone into hiding, or is running away from, or is shut himself off from, or has denied it, even into the example that you gave, that you couldn't even recall that something like that happened to. The trauma was so great. But I think also what was said is so beautiful, and what you showed is to create that safe space of trust, and of waiting, and of going at the pace of your client. And there's just the client knowing that you need to listen and to help them to reconnect to themselves and themselves by, then looking at from a self-transcendent distance and dealing with it. But it's this underneath are the everlasting arms that you as a therapist really give to allow that process to unfold. And like Kanda said, it's not a question of who raped you, what happened, that corners the client. It's a waiting and a listening and a receptive environment that you create. And there are these beautiful ways and means that you can help the client relax, that you had given in your previous talk. And thank you. I really enjoyed especially all the questionings and the answers that you gave. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Teria. Aviva.
Again, what Taria said, sorry, in any client therapist interaction, before the most important thing at the beginning of the process is to create trust and a feeling of safety before you can do anything, whether it's to us, a small issue, multiple issue, or a serious issue. That's the base for anything. I wanted to ask why you didn't mention the role of cortisol in trauma.
The role of what?
Cortisol. Cortisol? The hormone?
Cortisol. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mention it. In the basic video that I showed first, I mentioned about the sympathicus, the parasympathicus, and these things. So these simple shows are basic information. It's not complete. There's a lot more to say about it. So cortisol is just one thing. Yes.
I'm keeping this short. I really liked how in the video you mentioned, because in logotherapy we talk self-transcendence is away from the self to other people. But what I believed early on, and the first time I heard you mention it, is one also needs to be self-transcendent to oneself, to the inner child. So I love that I heard that from you. And the last thing, just going into it really shortly, there's a very good article that I can somehow send you guys. There's been a lot of research since what happened on October the 7th into how people process the trauma of what happened according to what substance they were taking. So, for example, psychedelics versus alcohol. They were surprised to find that people who had consumed a lot of alcohol were less successful in processing trauma and more traumatized, whereas people who were taking a psychedelic and they go into the different ones were less traumatized from the situation. So there's been a lot of research on it. It's very interesting, and I can share the link with you guys if you'd like.
Please send it, Aviva. That's very, very interesting. Of course, when you're, I think the more sensitive, that to me also, the more sensitive and open and trusting one is, the deeper your hurt. In other words, the more conscious you are and more available in the moment, the greater the hurt. And the psychedelic drugs or whatever they were on shielded them from this direct, assault, and it was kind of filtered through. And of course there are even situations where a medical intervention is also called for to help a client. Very interesting, but please send us that article. We'd love to especially because this is what I would like to continue with in our next Zoom session, particularly what we've experienced here in Israel. So I would love to hear that from you as well. Okay.
So Dida and then Leighton.
First, I really want to salute you for all these videos. Are incredible in terms of understanding what trauma is. They're really beautiful, and also all the answers that you gave to the questions. I want to come to my initial question and ask, when the person really doesn't remember anything, is it only by imagination that you somehow, of course, you have to create everything that Kanda has put an accent on, the trust and the receptive mood, etc. Of course, I liked very much what you said, that a wrong question is violence, actually. Really, I like that very much. But if the person feels extremely safe, but never the unconscious, the subconscious, or even the unconscious is ready to release the information, is it only by imagination that you guide it?
No, imagination is very easy to practice, and therefore this is what I wanted to show you. You can also work with EMDR. This is what I do, eye movement.
Yeah.
And then it brings up what is unsolved in our brain. It brings up everything.
Yeah,
So this is dangerous too, and you have to really know what to do when you use it. There are many ways to do things.
Yeah, and there are also many variations now of the eye movements. Yeah.
And we must respect, again, in the last instance, and let's conclude with this thought, not that I want to have the last say, but just in response to what you were saying, Dida, that I have found with Holocaust survivors that there is a way of living defiantly in the face of a trauma that cannot be solved. That it is too deep, too devastating to find healing. And therefore, just if somebody is so traumatized that they've cut it out completely and they're still able, that you can still encourage them in living a meaningful life, even over and above the trauma that they have chosen not to remember. That can be possible also. It's not to say we always have to go into the trauma to sometimes we must be very careful in not crossing the barriers of the client's own defenses, because they know best how to deal with themselves, and we facilitate that process. We don't enforce an answer by, and that's what Konda also referred to. You can do serious damage if you try and pry into and open up what the client doesn't want opened up. Okay, you have to wait, and if there's no desire to go there, you have to leave that also.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just a thought. We will continue this conversation. If you, I unfortunately will have to excuse myself now if you want to talk a bit more.
Yeah.
But
Robert has raised his hand, so maybe this is the last.
Yes, I just want again to relay a question from Lily Barrington. Maybe we can then not discuss it this time, but just for the next session, maybe start with this. Previously, Lily did ask about implanting false memories, and this one builds then on that. I was wondering, how does one deal with fictitious disorder or somatic symptom disorder in a lot of logotherapeutic context? One always wants to believe the client, but is it possible that we could lead clients astray? This might be an entirely different topic for another day, but as I said previously, then the previous question is about false memories that can be implanted, or is always a problem then.
Yeah.
So
well,
maybe we can then...
yeah, and Robert Frankel speaks about iatrogenic neurosis, neurosis that is created by giving a false impression to the client, a too traumatic impression to the client. And we'll take up the issue. Wow, with so many interesting questions. It shows you how brilliant the presentation was to have brought up all these questions and very provocative thoughts. So we'll continue the subject.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I will give some answers to what's in the chat, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Pam.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm gonna go.